Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. Forest Ranger Andrei Mikhailovich was walking through the morning forest, enjoying the freshness of the air and the melody of birdsong. Passing through a dense thicket, he suddenly stopped, noticing something unnatural among the leaves. Approaching, he saw a dead fox, whose body had already begun to be torn apart by scavengers. The fox lay on its side, its fur in disarray, exposing ribs and entrails now serving as food for worms and insects. Birds, attracted by the smell of decay, circled in the air, occasionally swooping down to peck at the flesh. The foul stench of putrefaction, growing stronger with each gust of wind, hit Andrei Mikhailovich's nose. He instantly felt his stomach contract in a spasm. The sight of decaying flesh and the thick, heavy smell caused a strong wave of nausea. His face turned pale, and unable to suppress the urge to vomit, he rushed into the nearest bushes. There, bent over, he threw up, feeling his body shudder with painful spasms. When he finished, Andrei Mikhailovich breathed heavily, trying to collect himself. He leaned against the trunk of a nearby tree, gripping the bark tightly as if it could give him strength. Greedily inhaling the fresh air, he slowly calmed down, listening to the sounds of the forest, which seemed infinitely distant from this place of death and decay. As Andrei Mikhailovich was still trying to recover from the intense nausea, his friend Sergei approached him. In his hands was a respirator, which he handed to the ranger with a look of concern on his face. "Andrei, take this. It might help," said Sergei, supporting his friend. "The smell is too strong, and I'm sure you don't want to go through that again." With gratitude, Andrei accepted the respirator and put it on, feeling the air become much cleaner and easier to breathe. Sergei nodded, satisfied that he could help his friend. "Now, let's head to the place I mentioned," said Sergei, leading Andrei through the forest. On the way, they crossed a small clearing, and there, at its edge, something made Andrei freeze. His heart raced as he saw the terrible sight that unfolded before him. In the clearing lay the bodies of numerous animals: deer, boars, hares, all of them dead. Their bodies were mangled, torn apart, and their eyes were void of life. Andrei Mikhailovich realized that a true catastrophe had occurred and stood frozen in horror. "Oh my God! What is this?" he whispered, clutching his heart. His face turned white with shock, and his eyes filled with fear and helplessness. Sergei silently put his arm around his friend's shoulders, supporting him. They both understood that they faced a huge problem and needed to find a way to deal with it. When Sergei suggested calling their superiors, Andrei Mikhailovich slowed his steps and looked at him with determination in his eyes. "Yes, this is undoubtedly one of the most terrible incidents we've encountered, but I think before reporting to the superiors, we should carefully examine everything ourselves," he insisted. Sergei nodded, understanding that his friend was right. They both knew that accurate data could be critically important in such a serious incident. Approaching the place where the animal corpses lay, Andrei Mikhailovich held his breath to avoid choking on the awful smell. He carefully examined each carcass, making notes in his notebook to have an accurate understanding of what had happened. The ranger's eyes reflected horror and concern as he saw the bodies of torn and mutilated animals. He noted dozens of corpses, listing species after species: wolves, foxes, hares, lynxes, black grouse. Each creature had perished, and each body was a witness to a terrible tragedy. Sergei silently supported his friend, knowing it was important to give him time and space to collect his thoughts. Finally, when the inspection was completed, Andrei Mikhailovich sighed and closed his notebook. "We need to report this to our superiors," he said, his voice firm despite the agitation. "But first, we need to find the cause and figure out how we can help this forest and its inhabitants." Sergei and Andrei stood in the clearing, discussing the horrifying incident they had just discovered. Their conversation was filled with concern and bewilderment, as they had never encountered anything like it before. "I can't believe someone could be capable of such a cruel slaughter of animals," Sergei said, surprise evident in his voice. "And it definitely doesn't seem like the work of poachers. Who do you think could have done this?" Andrei Mikhailovich furrowed his brow, deeply contemplating. I think this is the work of a human, possibly some kind of psychopath or maniac, he replied, apparently coming to this conclusion after careful examination of the scene. We need to be cautious, Andrei Mikhailovich cautioned his friend. If this is indeed the work of a human, who knows, maybe they are watching us right now. Sergei nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. You're right, Andrei. Let's call our superiors and report the incident, and then we'll immediately take action. The men took out their mobile phones and called the forestry management to report what they had discovered. Meanwhile, they prepared to dig a pit to bury the animal remains. Deciding not to split up, they set off to fetch shovels and lime. As they walked through the forest, the tension in the air was almost palpable, but the men were resolute in their determination to act. They knew this case required maximum caution and attention, and they were ready to face the challenge. When Sergei and Andrei returned to the place where they had earlier found the fox's body, something strange caught their attention. Clear paw prints of a fox were visible in the soft soil, leading to an old birch tree. The tracks appeared fresh, as if the fox had just passed by. This is strange, Andrei Mikhailovich remarked, leaning down to get a better look at the prints. Why would the fox return to the spot where we found its corpse? Sergei frowned, examining the tracks. Maybe it left something important there, or someone else came here after us, he speculated. Armed with determination to uncover the truth, the friends decided to follow the tracks. They led them to the base of the old birch tree, where fresh scratches were visible on the trunk, as if the fox's claws had left their mark. However, what they found at the foot of the tree made them freeze in horror. The dead fox lay by the trunk, but instead of being in a position natural for a corpse, it stood on its hind legs, as if alive. Its eyes were open, and its gaze seemed motionless, but something about this posture made it look alive. Sergei and Andrei exchanged frightened glances, their hearts beating in unison from the unexpected and eerie sight. The dead fox shouldn't have been in such a position. It was something beyond the realm of natural understanding. What the hell is this? Sergei whispered, his voice trembling with fear and confusion. Andrei Mikhailovich was equally stunned. I don't know, he said softly, struggling to find words. But I'm sure we need to report this to our superiors. This is something supernatural. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, the dead fox seemingly came to life. Its eyes, previously empty and motionless, now glowed with living malice, and its growling, shaking the air, filled Andrei Mikhailovich and Sergei's hearts with fear. Andrei Mikhailovich reacted swiftly, pushing himself off the ground and bending down to protect his face. The fox, as if remembering what such a movement meant, instantly lunged at him, its toothy jaws aimed at his chest. He felt its claws digging into his clothes, its teeth menacingly approaching his skin. Sergei didn't hesitate. He grabbed his wooden staff, which he always carried in the forest, and rushed to his friend's aid. He struck the fox from behind with such force that it flew off Andrei Mikhailovich, thrashing its head and growling, but not relenting. Sergei continued to strike the fox with the staff, relentlessly, until it was immobilized. His heart pounded in horror, but he knew that now the main thing was to save his friend. Finally, under the blows of the staff, the fox slowed its movements, and then froze completely. Its body was mangled, torn to such an extent that it was impossible to determine its shape. Sergei stepped back, trembling with tension and horror at what he had seen. Andrei Mikhailovich got up from the ground, trembling and weak, but alive. He looked at the dead fox, realizing that it had tried to kill him, and thanked Sergei for saving him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak but grateful. I don't know what I would do without you." Sergei looked at his friend, sympathy and relief mixing on his face. "We're in this together, Andrei," he said quietly. "Always." Supporting each other, they turned and left this place of horror, knowing that they still had a lot of work ahead of them to unravel the mystery of what had happened and protect the forest from new threats. After the horrifying attack and destruction of the dead fox, Andrei Mikhailovich and Sergei squatted down to discuss what had happened. The tension in the air was palpable, their minds filled with excitement and bewilderment. "What was that?" Sergei asked, his voice sounding through gritted teeth, as if he still felt the impact of the staff in his hands. That was unbelievable. Andrei Mikhailovich nodded slowly, his mind working at full capacity, trying to unravel the mystery of what had happened. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But it seems to me that it's something inexplicable, maybe some kind of virus or disease that altered the behavior of this fox. But it's still just a speculation." Sergei sighed, realizing the complexity of the situation. "We need to report this to our superiors," he said decisively. "Let them decide what to do next." Sergei took out his mobile phone to call the forestry management. However, to his disappointment, he found that there was no signal. "Damn it," he muttered, trying to dial the number again. "No signal. We need to go to the ranger station. Maybe we can find a network there." Andrei Mikhailovich nodded, and together they headed to the ranger station, hoping to establish a connection there and report the incident to their superiors. Questions and concerns swirled in their heads, but they were determined to act to protect the forest and its inhabitants from whatever new threat it might be. Andrei Mikhailovich and Sergei were engrossed in preparing for further action after the strange incident with the dead fox. They gathered tools and materials to bury the animal remains, realizing that it needed to be done as soon as possible to prevent the spread of disease or infection. Sergei was disappointed when he found out that Andrei Mikhailovich hadn't brought his phone into the forest. "That's not like you," Andrei, he remarked as they began the preparations. "Such situations require immediate communication. We must be prepared for any turn of events." "You're right," Sergei Andrei Mikhailovich agreed, feeling guilty for this oversight. "I don't know what I was thinking, not taking my phone. But now the main thing is to decide what to do with this situation." They focused on the task at hand, unaware that fate had prepared a new trial for them. When Andrei Mikhailovich returned to the ranger station for additional tools, he found Sergei lying on the floor, lifeless. "Sergei," he exclaimed, rushing to his friend. Andrei Mikhailovich's heart stopped when he realized that his friend was not breathing. He tried to help, but all his efforts were in vain. An ambulance and the police arrived quickly, but they couldn't do anything. Sergei's body was taken to the morgue for further examination, but the cause of his death was not immediately reported. Andrei Mikhailovich remained sitting in the ranger station, overwhelmed with grief and shock from the unexpected loss. He couldn't understand what had happened, and he felt completely alone and helpless in the face of the inexplicable tragedy. Sergei had been a reliable assistant and friend to Andrei Mikhailovich for many years. His youth and energy were extremely valuable in difficult times, especially in spring and autumn when the work in the forest required special attention and effort. He was always ready to support and help his old friend, often coming to his rescue in the most unpredictable situations. Despite his youth, Sergei had been offered several times to replace the aging forester in his position. The management saw him as a promising and energetic worker capable of bringing modern methods and approaches to the job. However, Sergei always refused such offers, sticking to his decision to work alongside Andrei Mikhailovich. His loyalty and devotion to their friendship proved stronger than opportunities for career advancement. The management, on the other hand, did not share warm feelings for the old forester. They often became angry with Andrei Mikhailovich for his old-fashioned methods of work and his disrespect for new technologies. For example, he preferred to fill out work forms by hand, refusing to use computers and electronic devices. Despite this, replacing him was difficult due to a lack of volunteers willing to work in the forest. Modern youth preferred to stay in the cities, and those who did decide to work in the forest were not always ready to take on the duties and difficulties that were placed on Andrei Mikhailovich. The loss of Sergei was like a bolt from the blue for Andrei Mikhailovich. Just that morning they had worked together, solving the problems of the forest, and now he was left alone, deprived of his faithful friend. Sergei not only saved his life from the attack of the resurrected fox, but was also a reliable anchor in difficult times. Now this reliable anchor was gone, leaving a void and deep sadness in Andrei Mikhailovich's heart. Inspector Bobak, despite his skepticism and distrust of the forester, continued his questioning and investigation into what had happened. He organized an inspection of the scene with the find and tried to get as much accurate information as possible from Andrei Mikhailovich about what had happened. However, Andrei Mikhailovich decided not to tell the police about the attack of the resurrected fox. He felt that it would raise mistrust and additional questions that he was not ready to discuss. Instead, he led the police to the clearing where the animal remains were found. Armed with a rifle for protection, Andrei Mikhailovich led the police through the forest to the scene of the incident. He was determined and ready to protect himself and the police from any possible threats that might await them in the forest. His heart was filled with bitterness and sadness over the loss of his friend, but his mind was clear and resolute in this difficult situation. The clearing where the animal remains were found turned out to be a place of new mysterious changes. Andrei Mikhailovich and Bobak, being on the spot, couldn't help but notice that the animal bodies had been moved and piled up in a completely different way than they had originally been lying. The forester pointed to the new corpses, including a moose that had not been previously seen in this clearing. This strange discovery raised even more questions and suspicions. But disagreements arose between Andrei Mikhailovich and Bobak. The forester insisted on the need for further investigation, pointing out the anomalous changes and new findings. He felt that something unusual was happening in the forest and that it deserved proper attention. However, Bobak was skeptical and believed that the forester might be disoriented due to stress and emotional shock from the death of his friend. He speculated that all these anomalous changes could simply be the result of imagination or misinterpretation of events. This led to a conflict between them, as Andrei Mikhailovich stubbornly tried to get his point across to Bobak, who remained steadfast in his skeptical position. Passions flared, and both sides were so convinced of their own rightness that understanding and agreement seemed unattainable. When one of the policemen started taking photos of the animal corpses despite Bobak's order to stop, the tension in the clearing reached its peak. During the photography process, suddenly the moose, which seemed completely lifeless, began to show signs of life. At first it was barely noticeable trembling, but then it began to move more actively, turned its head, and finally stood up on its legs. This unexpected turn of events caused panic among the police. Hearts froze in their chests, and eyes nervously watched every movement of the moose. At that moment, everyone understood that the moose, which seemed lifeless, was now awake, and its behavior was unpredictable. The police, including Bobak himself, retreated into the forest, realizing the danger of the situation. They prepared themselves sharply for a possible attack, gripping their weapons tightly and desperately looking around for a way out of this difficult situation. The dense trees in the forest seemed to be the only shelter from the suddenly revived moose, and the police were ready to run there if necessary. In this tense moment, time seemed to slow down, and every rustle in the forest caused a new wave of fear and anxiety. The moose, being revived, moved towards the police with a menacing determination, forcing them to hastily retreat through the forest. Crunching branches underfoot, rustling leaves, and sudden cries created an atmosphere of tension and threat, growing with each passing moment. Andrei Mikhailovich, already by the river, heard the cries and roars of the moose piercing the silence of the forest. He instantly understood that something serious was happening and was ready to defend himself. With his rifle at the ready, he listened to the sounds, tensely awaiting further developments. After several shots in the forest, complete silence fell. The light from the lanterns disappeared, as if swallowed by the darkness of the night. Even the wind subsided, as if hiding, waiting to see what would happen next. The moon, full and yellow, illuminated the riverbank, but its light barely reached the thickets of trees, creating a strange, mystical appearance of the surrounding forest. Andrei Mikhailovich froze, staring intently into the darkness, waiting for a response to his cries. But there was only silence in response, nothing breaking the emptiness. The forester's heart beat strongly, his breathing slowed, and he realized that he was left alone in the dark, unpredictable forest. The forester, standing by the river, was startled by the sudden appearance of the moose. This animal, which he had recently seen in the forest, now stood before him, looking menacing and aggressive. The sudden attacking beast prompted the forester to react instantly, and resorting to his rifle, he shot the moose to defend himself. The animal fell, but when the forester approached the carcass, he noticed the absence of blood, which made him ponder. Suspecting that something strange and sinister had occurred, the forester decided to return to the spot where he had found the animal carcasses. There he found cans of gasoline, perfect for igniting the carcass. Fearful but resolute, he doused the moose carcass with gasoline and set it ablaze. However, returning to the clearing brought him an even more shocking discovery. At the top of the pile of animal carcasses, where only corpses had previously lain, 4 police bodies appeared. This horrific and inexplicable turn of events made his heart freeze in horror. The forester felt that the situation had become even darker and more mysterious, and he had to uncover this terrible secret villainy that had befallen his forest. The forester, immersed in dark thoughts about what had happened, decided to perform a purification ritual by fire. Pouring gasoline around the pile of animal and police remains, he set it alight. Flames erupted, enveloping the carcasses and consuming them in their fiery embrace. The forester stood in silence, watching the gruesome sight as the remains of animals and police contorted in the flames, emitting unnatural and eerie sounds until dawn. He felt that this was an ancient purification ritual that had to be performed to rid the forest of the evil that had engulfed it. Suddenly, in this atmosphere of mourning and darkness, the forester remembered the words of his deceased friend Sergei about the bitter water in the Ryabushka River. Deciding to check this, he headed for the river. When he dipped his hand into the water and took a sip, he tasted bitterness. It was a stunning discovery that confirmed Sergei's words and raised even more questions about what was happening in this forest. At that moment, when the forester was absorbed in thoughts and memories, he heard a voice behind him. Turning around, he saw his friend Sergei standing next to the smoldering moose carcass. His heart froze with astonishment and trepidation, and he realized that this unusual phenomenon had a deep meaning that he had to unravel. As the forester Andrei Mikhailovich focused on parts of his friend Sergei's body, he noticed something strange. Their skin had acquired an ashen gray color, as if soaked in smoke and ash. This horrifying sight made Andrei's heart ache with pain and anxiety. As he struggled to cope with a sudden bout of heartache, Andrei began to fall. But unexpectedly for him, Sergei's hands caught him, supporting him. At that moment, Sergei uttered words that sounded like a portent, "It's time to retire." As the pain overwhelmed Andrei, his consciousness began to fade slowly. He saw Sergei's smiling face before him, but it seemed blurry, as if he were seeing it through the thickness of water. His head spun, and before his eyes flickered black and gray spots, like dark clouds against a stormy sky. Gradually, Andrei began to lose his sense of reality, feeling the darkness closing in on him, muffling external sounds. His consciousness slowly faded, as if he were descending into the depths of an abyss, where only muted sounds reached him from afar, reminding him of his solitude in this dark, mystical world. After the death of the forester Andrei Mikhailovich's watchtower became a symbol of mystery and horror for the local residents. It remained deserted and desolate, like an abandoned lighthouse at sea, awaiting its final guardian. Attempts by the chief of the forestry to find a new forester met with responses from only a few, but each of them, confronted with dark legends and rumors about the events that had taken place in the forest, refused the offer, preferring to ensure their safety and leave the area. The chief of the forestry continued to futilely try to fill the vacancy, but each new day only strengthened the belief that Mikhailovich's watchtower had become a cursed place, where the spirits of the past and dark forces ruled over nature. He knew that it would take much time before anyone dared to occupy this dreadful place again. Thus, the forester vacancy remained unfilled, and Mikhailovich's watchtower remained empty and forgotten, standing on the edge of the forest, like a grim monument to bygone times and secrets that remained unrevealed. Meeting Andron at the club turned out to be a real revelation for me. When I first saw him, he was the center of attention, surrounded by an energy and confidence that simply sparked in the air. We started talking about his passion for cycling, and I was amazed by his enthusiasm and dedication to this activity. Gradually, I delved into this world with him. Our weekends were filled with cycling trips around the area, and each time it was an incredible adventure. We explored snowy trails in winter, tackled steep climbs and thrilling descents, and in summer, enjoyed magnificent landscapes and fresh air. Each cycling trip became not only a sporting challenge for me, but also an opportunity to discover something new. I learned about maintaining a bicycle in good condition, how to choose routes correctly, and even how to plan food and water for long rides. But the most valuable thing about this hobby was that it brought me new friends and strengthened our friendship with Andron. Together we overcame difficulties, celebrated successes, and made incredible discoveries. Each cycling trip became for us not only a sporting competition but also a time for communication, laughter, and inspiration. Andron was not just my cycling partner, he was a true expert in survival and sports tourism. His experience and knowledge in this field were remarkable, and every time we embarked on a new adventure, I felt like I was in safe hands. Once he invited me on a mountain trek, and it became one of the most unforgettable experiences of my life. We started our journey from a small base camp in the valley, where Andron demonstrated his skills in wilderness survival and camp organization. He taught me how to properly set up a tent, cook food over an open fire, and navigate the environment. During the trek, Andron shared his knowledge about mountain safety, proving to be a valuable source of information on how to prevent and respond to emergencies. He taught me how to safely cross rivers, avoid dangerous animals, and navigate by the stars at night. One of the most impressive moments was our ascent to the summit, from where we had a breathtaking view of the surrounding landscapes. With every step up, Andron supported me and inspired me for further achievements, making this experience even more meaningful. Thanks to his experience and guidance, I not only learned how to survive in the wilderness, but also gained confidence in myself. The trek with Andron became not only an unforgettable adventure for me, but also a lesson in self-improvement and self-trust. Their first joint adventure in the forest proved to be a real challenge due to the unfamiliarity of riding on rugged terrain. Cycling through forest trails seemed like a tempting opportunity to immerse themselves in nature, but it turned out to be much more difficult than they anticipated. Anticipating new experiences, they began their journey with enthusiasm and optimism. The forest trails looked appealing and mysterious, and they couldn't wait to explore every corner of this world. However, over time, they realized that they had underestimated the difficulty of the path. The rugged terrain and uneven trails became a real test for their bikes and their riding skills. They encountered tree roots, rocks, and steep descents that required maximum concentration and agility. At first, they struggled with these obstacles, but as they progressed along the trails, they began to adapt to the conditions and improve their skills. Each obstacle they overcame became a new achievement for them, confirming that they were capable of overcoming any difficulties. With every kilometer, they became stronger and more confident, boldly overcoming any obstacles in their path. Despite the challenges, they did not lose spirit or give up. On the contrary, they inspired each other with their determination and perseverance. Their first joint adventure in the forest was a real test for them, but at the same time, it was an opportunity to discover something new about themselves and push their boundaries. In the depths of the forest, where their path led them in search of new adventures, Andron and his friend discovered something mysterious and disturbing: a doll abandoned among the leaf litter. This doll looked unusual, as if a lost toy from the past, forgotten by time amidst the green embrace of the forest. But what was truly shocking was the mysterious note lying next to the doll, like a ghostly warning of something ominous. The note was written clumsily, as if by the hand of a trembling person, and contained strange words about following the rules of the forest and being cautious of foreign voices. This mysterious text awakened in them a sense of vague unease and sudden anxiety. What could the author of this note mean? What mysterious forces could be lurking in the depths of the forest, beyond their visibility? These questions began to hang in the air, enveloping them in the icy breath of mystery and uncertainty. They felt the presence of something unknown, as if invisible eyes were watching their every move, and the wind carried mysterious whispers from the ancient forest. But despite the fear and uncertainty that suddenly gripped them, they decided not to retreat. Their curiosity and thirst for adventure overcame fear, and they decided to explore this mysterious find. Strange warnings and mystical atmosphere only fueled their desire to uncover the secrets of this place and find out what lay behind the foreign voices and tangled forest trails. Such discoveries and mysterious messages, frozen in time, awakened in them a sense of adventure, as if they had become the main characters in an incredible quest, searching for lost artifacts or unraveling the secrets of ancient legends. All these elements turned a simple journey through the forest into an exciting cinematic plot, where every rustle of leaves, every strange moment could mean something more than just a random find. They decided to embrace this challenge of nature as true adventurers. Like brave souls ready to go all the way, they began to examine every note, every strange sign, as if deciphering the code of riddles they were about to solve. Each leaf, each line of text, became a key to the next step in this mysterious game. This forest became their arena, and the mysterious finds became their tasks. They felt that something greater than mere curiosity was awakening within them. It was their adventurer's soul, ready to accept the challenge of the unknown. Every track, every old doll or note became stepping stones on their path, leading them to something extraordinary, something they had not yet imagined. Thus, this mysterious activity in the forest became not just an adventure but a true exploration, an exploration of the deepest corners of the soul and the secrets of nature. They accepted this challenge with open hearts and minds, ready for any trials and dangers that might await them in this mystical forest. Under the guise of a game or quest, Andron and the main character ventured into the forest, full of determination to explore its mysteries and solve the riddles that might lie within its depths. At the beginning of their journey, everything seemed simple and fun, like children's games of hide and seek, where every rustle and shadow became part of an exciting adventure. However, as they progressed deeper into the forest, the game became increasingly tense and real. Mysterious sounds from the undergrowth, unfamiliar tracks on the ground, and unexpected events began to introduce elements of unpredictability and threat into their adventure. Fear and excitement penetrated their hearts, but they did not stop, continuing to move forward, like true explorers, ready for any challenges. Soon they encountered real dangers. Traps disguised in foliage, unfamiliar creatures lurking in the depths of the forest, and strange messages warning of something mysterious and sinister began to test their courage and determination. Every new twist in the road became a trial, and every discovery became a key to a new mystery. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Andron and the main character continued their journey, boldly and resolutely forging ahead. They understood that only by solving the riddles of this mystical forest could they find a way out of this labyrinth of stories and secrets. Their adventure became increasingly thrilling and intense, turning a simple game into a true test of spirit and courage. Like ancient heroes conquering forbidden forests and unexplored lands, Andron and the main character ventured into the depths of the forest, unaware of what lurked in its thickets. But dangers, like a spider's web, wove unnoticed, waiting for their victims. Traps, cunning and treacherous, were expertly set and cleverly hidden in the foliage and bushes, like the teeth of a beast ready to snap at the slightest sign of danger. Despite their experience and vigilance, Andron and the main character failed to notice the invisible threat lurking in their path. And then, like in a tragedy, the trap was revealed, mercilessly and swiftly engulfing its victim. Andron, a skilled survivalist and experienced traveler, fell victim to a cunning trap that instantly took his life, leaving only memories and pain in the hearts of those close to him. The main character, left in shock and despair after the loss of his friend, felt the world around him crumbling, like a painting torn in half. The shadow of death crept into his soul, prompting him to question the meaning of this strange adventure, the price to be paid for exploring the mysteries of nature. Thus, in the forest, full of mysteries and dangers, a collision occurred between courage and fate, between desire and reality. Andron, becoming a victim of the trap, became a symbol of man's struggle with nature, with himself, and with the unknown lurking in the depths of the forest. The suddenness and ruthlessness of the tragic events in the forest pierced the hearts not only of the participants in this adventure, but also of all who encounter its outcome. Life, seeming so insurmountable and long, can be cut off in a moment, like a thread caught in the claws of fate. The feeling of the fragility of human life becomes a bitter lesson that inevitably must be realized in the face of the injustice of a loved one's death. This tragic story prompts reflection on the safety of outdoor adventures. Conquering dense forests and wild expanses requires not only courage and determination, but also awareness of risks and preparation. After all, nature, beautiful and majestic, can also be merciless and dangerous. Such expeditions require careful planning, knowledge of the environment, the ability to cope with unexpected situations, and of course caution. As the main character delved deeper into the dark expanses of the forest, he began to notice something strange and incomprehensible. At first, these were just barely noticeable details rustling in the leaves, which seemed unusually rhythmic, and shadows slipping among the trees, like animated silhouettes. However, with each new step, the mystical aura of the forest became more palpable, and the protagonist began to experience a strange discomfort, as if he found himself in a world where the boundary between reality and fantasy blurred. But the most mysterious event occurred when his smartphone, a faithful companion in any adventure, began to behave unusually. Instead of the usual notifications of incoming messages, the device's screen flickered, as if trying to attract its owner's attention. It seemed as though the smartphone had gained its own consciousness and was trying to communicate with the protagonist. Surprised and somewhat frightened, the protagonist opened the messaging app, and immediately his gaze caught a strange message that appeared on the screen. "You are not alone" was all that was written there. Suddenly, a wave of anxiety and bewilderment washed over the protagonist. Who or what could send such a message? And why? The smartphone continued to flicker, like a living creature, as if trying to convey something important. This new development added even more mystery to the already tense atmosphere. The main character felt that his adventure in the forest was turning into a real quest, where every step and every discovery was a key to unraveling the mystery shrouding this dark corner of nature. With each new step in the labyrinth of forest enigmas, the main character felt how the thin threads of events tangled into knots of misunderstanding. Each new circumstance, whether it was a note, a trap, or an encounter with a young girl, seemed to present a new challenge unexpectedly thrown in his path and causing confusion. Maintaining clarity of thought was particularly difficult when every rustle in the leaves or shadow on the trees seemed suspicious and menacing. The protagonist felt like he was playing a dangerous game where every move could be decisive and every step could be his last. But even in the darkest moments, the hero did not lose hope of rescue. He continued to move forward, striving to find a way out of this tangled forest labyrinth. However, at some point his perseverance and determination were subjected to a serious test. Suddenly, from the dense thickets, a sharp branch burst forth, as if attacking the hero with all its malice. Swiftly approaching, it pierced his chest, leaving a sharp burning sensation and literally causing his heart to stop from pain. The hero fell to the ground, clutching his hand to the wound, but blood still rushed from it, like a running river, knowing no barriers. This moment became not only a physical trial for him, but also a soulful retribution for his desire to unravel the forest's mystery. In the light of pain and despair, he realized that the journey in this forest had become much more dangerous and complicated than he could have imagined. The hero's willpower transcended the boundaries of his physical abilities. Despite fear, pain, and exhaustion, he continued to fight for his life, persistently seeking a way out of the forest. His steps became increasingly uncertain, and his heart beat in rhythm with pain and anxiety. When the sharp branch pierced his chest, the hero felt how the burning pain engulfed him entirely. But instead of sinking into hopelessness, he focused on maintaining composure and acting rationally. Clenching his teeth and suppressing cries of pain, he resolutely began to act. The hero's fingers gripped a piece of cloth with such force that the blood seemed to freeze in his veins. He didn't even dare to breathe, fearing that even the slightest movement could intensify the pain. But despite everything, he knew he needed to act quickly. Focusing, he slowly began to extract the branch from his chest, each movement accompanied by excruciating pain. Every centimeter of movement was agony, but the hero did not retreat. He understood that it was necessary to survive. Finally, when the branch was fully extracted, the hero felt relief slowly spreading through his body. He collapsed to the ground, drained and wounded, but still fighting for his existence. It was just one of many trials he had to endure, but he knew there was much more to experience before finding a way out of this dark forest. Struggling with pain and exhaustion, the hero reached out with trembling hands to his wound. He felt something solid falling out of it, accompanied by a new wave of pain. Carefully extracting the object from the wound, he discovered a new note, stained with his own blood. Not wanting to miss any opportunity to unravel the forest's mystery, he gathered his willpower and read the message. Meanwhile, his gaze fell on another strange occurrence. In the darkness of the forest, illuminated by the faint rays of sunlight barely penetrating, he noticed a shadow resembling a human figure. Approaching closer, he realized it was not just a shadow before him was the body of a woman, fused to a tree. Her weathered face distorted by time, and her clothes faded and colorless. But what caused real horror was that the woman's body, seemingly trapped in the embrace of the tree, appeared to be moving. Her weathered hands trembled slightly, as if she were trying to free herself from her ancient prison. The hero, overwhelmed by disgust and fear, shuddered at the sight of this grim spectacle. He felt a tremor run through his body, and his heart pounded in his chest as if trying to escape from the trap it had fallen into. But even in this horrifying moment, the hero understood that it was not the end of his trials. Many mysteries lurked in the forest, and he was determined to unravel them, no matter what. Suddenly, a sinister crunch broke the silence of the forest, and the hero felt his skin crawl. He turned to see what had caught the attention of this predator, and at that moment, his heart froze in terror. Before him stood a sheer nightmare, a creature, as if emerged from a nightmare, with a horrifying combination of murky eyes, through which a spark of life shone, and fur entangled in darkness, like a shroud of death. The creature, if it could even be called that, moved gracefully and silently, as if possessing a magic not of this world. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness like burning coals, and the hero felt his blood freeze in his veins. He realized that this moment could be the last in his life. But despite the fear and horror that engulfed him, the hero took a deep breath and gathered the remnants of his strength. He was determined to continue fighting because there was no turning back for him. Striving for survival, he adhered to his principles and knowledge gained through years of training and exploration. Though fatigue weighed heavily on his body, pain pierced his chest, and danger threatened from all sides, the hero did not falter. He was determined to see it through, to find a way out of this labyrinth of evil, remaining true to his goals and survival principles. With every step, he continued to fight, striving towards the light at the end of this dark forest, no matter what. The flames of the campfire flickered in the darkness, as if trying to drive away the fears that enveloped the forest with its dark embrace. The hero, exhausted from the arduous journey and wounded by the risks of this mysterious place, decided to take a moment to rest. He lit the campfire to warm himself and gather his thoughts. And suddenly, as if appearing out of the darkness like a ghost, a hunter stood before him. His gaze was resolute, and he held a rifle in his hands, a symbol of hope and protection in these insane lands. At first, the hero was frightened, grasping for anything he could find, but fear quickly turned into surprise and hope. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," the hunter said, preparing to leave, but his gaze stopped on the wounded hero. "What happened to you?" "You need help," he said, approaching the hero. The hero, gritting his teeth from pain, initially resisted accepting help, but a flame of hope ignited in his heart. The hunter offered help, even despite the hero's refusal. His determination and kindness seemed to pierce through the darkness of the forest, and the hero felt that there was something greater in this man than just a passerby. Despite doubts and fears, the hero agreed to accept the help. And in that moment, under the light of the campfire, a spark of hope ignited in the hero's heart. He realized that he was not alone in this world, and that even in the darkest corners, one could encounter kind souls willing to help. In the fading light of the campfire, the hero struggled to maintain clarity of mind. He lay down on the ground, his thoughts swirling with disorderly thoughts of hope and despair. The wound in his chest burned, as if trying to extract the last drops of life from him. But amidst this confusion, his attention was drawn to the figure of the hunter, suddenly coming to life in the dead forest. The hero experienced an instant surge of hope, hoping for salvation. However, the hunter's gaze was not resolutely determined, but almost empty. His eyes did not radiate with living energy. Instead, they seemed to burn with a soulless fire. As the hero prepared to accept help, his eyes unexpectedly lingered on the hunter's face. And suddenly, in the dark world he found himself in, the dead truth was revealed. The hunter was dead, long ago. His body was frozen in the same sitting position as the corpse found earlier. It was a ghost, and its phantom form only maintained the illusion of life. The hunter's words, offering help, sounded like an echo of a long-extinguished soul, and the hero realized that it was a clue hidden in the plot of this dark game. A beast of fear stirred in his heart, and his mind was filled with terrifying clarity. He understood that in this insane forest, one could trust no one, not even oneself. Breathing heavily, the hero once again found himself alone in the dead world of the forest, where the rules played were as harsh as death itself. But something new appeared in his eyes, something resolute. He realized that even in this dark reality, one could find a way out, if only to maintain faith and determination. And so, with the last remnants of strength, the hero rose, overcoming pain and fear, and marched forward, towards new trials, no matter what. And although his story in this forest could have ended in tragedy, his determination and courage affirmed that even in the most hopeless places, the light of hope can still shine. The three friends, with the storyteller Vlad and Kirill, decided to set off to the village in their car. Their journey led them through picturesque fields and dense forests, bathed in the golden rays of the setting sun. The storyteller sat in the front passenger seat, enjoying the scenery and occasionally dozing off, while Vlad confidently drove the car. Kirill, comfortably settled in the back seat, was lost in his own thoughts. At first, the trip went smoothly. The road wound through fields where the golden sunlight played, and gradually they delved deeper into the forest. However, after some time, the steady hum of the engine was replaced by a strange noise, which boded ill. The car began to jerk, and eventually came to a halt amidst the forest, surrounded by tall, dark trees. The storyteller woke up to the sudden silence and saw Vlad studying the dashboard with a furrowed brow. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Vlad merely shook his head and stepped out of the car to inspect under the hood. Kirill, who had been sitting quietly in the back until then, also grew concerned and offered his assistance. The guys opened the hood and began inspecting the engine. There was tension and uncertainty in their actions. Vlad scratched his head. Kirill examined the wiring, but neither of them could figure out what was wrong. Minutes passed, feeling like an eternity, but all attempts to start the car proved futile. Turning the key in the ignition repeatedly, Vlad could only listen to the dull clicks, but the engine remained lifeless. "Well, aren't we quite the mechanics?" Kirill eventually said with a hint of jest, trying to lighten the mood as he too delved into the engine bay. Another half-hour passed, then an hour, but his efforts yielded nothing. The forest was descending into the evening twilight, the air grew cool, and only a gentle breeze played with the leaves on the trees. "And what a bunch of drivers we are," the storyteller finally exclaimed in frustration. "First problem, and no one can do anything about it." Seeing no other option, the friends decided to wait for someone to pass by and help. Although the hope for this was weak, they were deep in the forest, far from busy roads. Looking around, Kirill suddenly exclaimed, "Wait, I know this place. We've been here with my parents. There should be a village nearby." Confidence rang in his voice, instilling hope in the others. Despite Vlad's doubts, they decided to check this chance. Vlad stayed with the car, hoping someone would still come by, while the storyteller and Kirill ventured deeper into the forest in search of salvation. Thus began their adventure, which promised to be much more mysterious and dangerous than they could have imagined. "Are you sure? We're in the middle of the forest," Vlad asked, listening to the silence enveloping them. But Kirill insisted he knew where they were, and that he could find the way to the village. After a brief discussion, they decided to split up. Vlad stayed with the car, hoping that someone would pass by and help. The storyteller, tired of sitting still, decided to accompany Kirill. He felt that movement and action were better than just waiting in the darkness. "All right, let's see how well you know these parts," Kirill the storyteller said, giving Vlad an encouraging pat on the shoulder. They took flashlights and a few bottles of water with them, as an unknown path through the dense forest lay ahead of them. Kirill strode confidently ahead, recounting how he used to walk these trails with his parents. The storyteller followed him, trying not to lag behind or stumble over the tree roots hidden in the twilight. The forest gradually plunged into darkness, and every rustle and creak of the trees began to seem ominous. "Are you absolutely sure we're going in the right direction?" the storyteller asked intermittently, feeling the tension mounting with each passing minute. "Yes, I'm sure we'll soon reach the village," Kirill replied, but his voice sounded less confident than before. About 20 minutes passed. The forest, which had recently seemed so picturesque, now surrounded them on all sides, looming with black shadows. In the light of their flashlights, the trees appeared to be living creatures, stretching their branches towards them. The cold evening air filled their lungs, adding to their sense of unease. You talked about the village, but so far we've only gone deeper into this forest, the storyteller said with a hint of irritation in his voice, looking around in an attempt to find some kind of landmark. Kirill stopped and peered into the darkness intently. I'm sure the village must be somewhere around here, he said, but with less certainty than before. When they were almost losing hope, a lone two-story wooden house appeared on the horizon. Light shone from its windows and smoke billowed from the chimney. This doesn't look like a village, the storyteller said, eyeing the house warily. But it's better than nothing. Maybe they can help us, Kirill replied. They headed towards the house, still hoping to find salvation. With each step, the house seemed less welcoming, but they had no other choice. They knocked on the door, unaware of what awaited them behind it. The friends had been walking for hours, forging a path through the dense forest. The wind cut through them, and their feet sank into the snow, which seemed to grow deeper with every step. Suddenly, amidst the trees, they spotted a dim light. It was a lone two-story house, standing on the edge of the forest. Its windows glowed with warm, yellow light, and smoke rose from the chimney, dissipating into the frosty air. Kirill stopped, looking at the house with surprise. He had lived in this area his whole life, and knew for certain that there shouldn't be any buildings here. This is strange, he said, puzzled, glancing at his friends. I thought there would be a village here, but I've never seen this house before. Despite their doubts and internal fears, the friends realized they had no other choice. Their car had broken down several kilometers behind them, and the night had already descended upon the forest, making the search for help almost impossible. Kirill and the storyteller exchanged glances and, without speaking, made their way to the house, hoping that one of the owners could help them. Approaching the house, they felt increasingly uneasy, but the necessity to fix the car problem and find shelter for the night outweighed their fears. The storyteller resolutely knocked on the old wooden door. The sound of the knock echoed in the silence of the night, and after a few seconds, the door slowly creaked open. Standing in the doorway was an old woman. Her face was wrinkled, and one eye gleamed dimly, obviously blind. The woman's clothes were dirty and tattered, but her gaze was friendly yet somewhat wary. "Who are you, and what do you need at such a late hour?" she asked, eyeing the friends from head to toe. The storyteller quickly explained the situation: the broken-down car, the need for assistance, and a place to stay for the night. The old woman listened attentively, nodding. "I can't help you with the car, my Misha doesn't run anymore," she said sadly. "But you can spend the night here. It will be warm and safe." Kirill and the storyteller exchanged glances, contemplating her offer. They both knew they had no other choice. "Thank you, we would be very grateful," Kirill replied, trying to smile, although his heart was still filled with anxiety. The old woman stepped aside, inviting them inside, and closed the door behind them, separating the cold and dark night from the warmth and coziness of her old but hospitable home. Kirill and the storyteller exchanged a quick glance, agreeing on their next steps. Kirill decided to return to the car for Vlad, while the storyteller stayed in the house with the mysterious old woman. As he left the house, Kirill felt a strange shiver, as if something was not right, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. The old woman silently nodded, pointing with her hand to the door leading to her house. They slowly made their way inside, and the storyteller couldn't help but notice the dark and mysterious shadows lurking in the corners of the old building. The old woman led the storyteller into a humble kitchen, where an old, worn-out table stood, and invited him to sit down. The room had a melancholy atmosphere, with dusty shelves adorned with scattered dishes and old photographs. While the old woman poured tea, the storyteller couldn't help but notice the strange appearance of the drink. The teapot emitted hissing sounds, and there were some unidentifiable hairs floating in the cup. He pretended to drink, averting his gaze to avoid awkwardness. The old woman sat opposite him, observing his every move with a mysterious smile on her face. Her eyes, sparkling in the dim light, seemed deep and full of secrets, arousing a sense of unease in the storyteller. He felt that behind this mask of friendliness, there was something incomprehensible and ominous. A rustle on the second floor pierced the silence of the house, causing the storyteller to look up from his teacup. Seeing his tense expression, the old woman merely shrugged, stating that it was just Vova, not her son Misha, as if that should alleviate the tension. While the old woman went upstairs, the storyteller remained with the unsettling smell that began to fill the air. It was the smell of decay and unearthly chill, as if something lurked in this house, penetrating the very depths of its old walls. Pouring the remnants of the tea down the sink, the storyteller suddenly felt as if someone or something was watching him from the darkness of the corners. He felt a chill run down his spine, and his heart skipped a beat, as if sensing something ominous. Suddenly the door swung open, and the old woman returned, but something was off. There was a mark on her face, as if someone had touched her skin with cold fingers. She uttered something strange about the forest of hands, further increasing the storyteller's questions. But before he could ask anything, the old woman headed towards the exit, declaring that it was time for her to water the garden, leaving the storyteller alone with his bewilderment and fear, which now became even more palpable. With a mysterious smile, the old woman asked the storyteller to take the teacup to Misha on the second floor. Not wanting to arouse suspicions or disrupt her strange order, the storyteller agreed and ascended the ancient wooden staircase. But when he opened the door to Misha's room, the unpleasant smell, which had been growing stronger, became unbearable. In the corner of the room, he saw a horrifying sight. 2 bodies lay on the floor. One of them was without legs, and its breathing was barely noticeable. In horror, the storyteller recoiled, realizing that something terrible was happening in this house. Tormented by fear and horror, the storyteller dropped the teacup, shattering it into pieces, and rushed to the staircase, stumbling on each step. By the time he reached the ground floor, the old woman was already waiting for him at the front door, her face expressing calmness and unwavering composure. But the storyteller couldn't trust her after what he had seen. Without hesitation, he dashed outside through the window, breaking the glass with his shoulder. The fresh air and the light from the lantern seemed like a comfort to him after the darkness of the house. But his horror only intensified when he saw a dozen hands protruding from the ground, as if trying to break free. Casting one last glance at the house, the storyteller turned and ran into the forest, knowing only one thing: he had to escape from this place as far as possible before it was too late. Among the dense trees, the storyteller met Kirill, who exclaimed with relief that they had managed to fix the car. The storyteller shared with his friend what had happened in the mysterious house, recounting his horrifying impressions. They wasted no time and quickly made their way to the car. Their hearts still beat faster than usual, but now they had a path to freedom. The next day, the friends gathered everyone from the village and returned to the scene, determined to solve the mystery of the mysterious house. But despite all their efforts, they couldn't find any traces of the house. Even those who lived nearby claimed they had never seen such a structure. In desperation and disappointment, the friends turned to the local grandfather from the neighboring village. He told them a terrible story about the house that appears and disappears in the forest, about the insane old woman who lives in it. According to the grandfather, the old woman grows her garden from human hands, paralyzes people with her tea, and buries them alive, considering her deceased relatives to be alive. Realizing that they had encountered something beyond their understanding, the friends decided to end their search and leave this place, never to return again.